Ochre the Smoker, a fantastic fable, written and illustrated by Doug McGregor. Chapter 1. Once upon a time there lived an old ogre named Ochre. Ochre was a mean old ogre, and not only that, he was a smoker. Ochre the Smoker lived atop a old rickety castle high above seaside village. The castle was decrepit and had smokestacks hanging off it everywhere. Sticking out here and there, the top chimneys spewed smoke 24 hours a day. The castle was covered in soot and ash. Not only that, it smelled really bad all the time. The seaside villagers down below hated the ogre and his smoke-spewing castle, but Ochre the Smoker didn't care. He lit up day and night, and sometimes puffed as many as 4 coal-flavored cigs at a time. Sometimes Ochre would smoke so much puffs of smoke would come out of his ears. The villagers were also scared of Ochre, and they couldn't find the cigs. A great roar would be heard all over the valley below. Ochre was always angry, and the villagers knew when he needed to light up and couldn't. They all wished Ochre would quit his nasty habit and stop being so angry. They wished he would just go away, and his stinky castle would stop polluting day and night. They never saw blue skies, and the sun had a yellow haze around it. And when it was hot, it was really hot. They couldn't go outside and breathe most of the time. One day the littlest of the villagers passed by the town wishing well and looked down in its dark abyss. I wish Ogre Ochre, that big angry smoker, would go away forever, he thought. I wish the skies were blue. I wish the sun would shine by day and the moon would glow by night. The littlest villager then dropped his lucky Indian head penny in the well and closed his eyes for the wish to come true. Weeks passed and Ochre the Smoker had more coal-flavored cigs blown in by giant transport helicopter. Crates and crates of them rolled in. He puffed and puffed and puffed. The village was so thick with smoke and ash that no one went outside for fear of coughing and burning their eyes. Then one night a strange thing happened. When everyone was asleep, a wispy mist started to rise inside the village wishing well. It reached the top of the well and started to encircle the town square. It drifted over the bakery where the local baker was up early making muffins in the oven. It drifted over the emergency siren and the village clock tower. It sailed up and up over the entire village. It was strange and eerie looking. It didn't make a sound. It was a carpet of fog that rose and climbed over houses and businesses, covering everything like a blanket. The newspaper delivery boy noticed it first while he was tossing a paper on a high porch. Wow, look at that! It is raising up to Ochre, the smoker's castle. I can hardly see the smokestacks and chimneys. It was true. The rising blanket of fog had sealed off Ochre the Smoker and his castle from the village below. As the day broke and people woke up, the town was abuzz with excitement. Look up there at the giant blanket of fog. I can't see Ochre and his ugly castle, they cried. Yes, and I can breathe better. Yes, me too, said another villager. The littlest villager woke up too. He was smiling from ear to ear and wondering, could it be? Did my wish come true? Had Ochre the Smoker finally gone away? Well, high above the fog in his ogre underwear on, Ochre was waking up from his deep snore sleep. Where's my cigs? He said. I need to light up right now. He walked out on his castle balcony and looked for cigs. I know I put them somewhere. Oh yes, here they are, right where I left them last night. He gazed out over the balcony railing and lit up 3 coal-flavored cigs at once. What? What is that? He gasped. Everywhere he looked, it was white. Where's the trees, the road, the village below? He was astonished. The fog was all he could see. He didn't even know it was fog. He touched the white mist with his big ugly boot. Why is it soft and I can step on it, he said. He took one step and another. He was walking on a white fluffy carpet of fog. He walked about 20 paces and suddenly he felt through to his waist. The big angry ogre was hanging in the air inside a huge pillow of fog. The villagers below were looking up and saw nothing but his big ugly feet hanging in the sky. He was stuck and couldn't move. With his legs dangling from his mouth, he tried to push himself up and couldn't. With a big angry voice, he shouted, "Get me out of this mess!" Suddenly, the carpet of fog moved around him. It rolled in from all sides. As it did, the skies turned blue and the morning sun appeared above the villagers' head. As they looked up and saw the fog carpet form one big puffy cloud that kept Ochre from moving, he was now sitting strapped into one giant cloud floating in midair. "Hey, it's a giant smoker's chair," someone yelled. Now way away from his castle, he realized his predicament. "My cigs! I don't have my cig!" he roared. He was drifting further away from his castle, and the cigs tangled in his mouth were getting shorter. Suddenly, a big gust of wind came along and pushed him out of sight. He was sitting strapped in his smoker's chair. The villagers were astounded. There was no ogre in sight. Ochre the smoker was gone for good. A giant celebration took place that night. People danced in the streets, sang songs, and cheered at the top of their clear lungs. And for once in as long as they could remember, the moon shone down. They could even see their shadows on the ground at night. Meanwhile, Ochre the smoker was down to his last puff. His favorite coal-flavored cigs were now hundreds of miles behind him as he drifted over the ocean below. "Where am I? Where the heck am I?" he screamed. A distant voice yelled back, "You're over the Pacific Ocean. Don't you recognize it?" "Heck no," he yelled back. "Who are you?" "I'm a whale," yelled the voice below. "A whale? Hey, you don't happen to have a smoke I could borrow, do you?" asked the ogre. "What? That's ridiculous!" "You must be kidding," said the whale. "We have enough trouble with the temperature of the ocean. It is rising fast. And you are asking whether I have any smoke?" The whale then disappeared in disgust. Ochre looked over the edge of his smoker's chair and saw nothing but water. The whale was no help. He kept drifting mile after mile, and it was getting colder and colder. He was out of cigs, and his anger and desperation was rising. Suddenly, he yelled at the top of his dirty lungs, "I need a cig, and I need it now!" The big angry ogre roared and roared. "Sorry, I don't have one," replied a voice below. Suddenly, there was a huge chill in the air, and the ogre started shivering. "I'm freezing cold," he screamed. "You should be," yelled the voice. "You are getting closer to the North Pole." "The North Pole? How did I get near the North Pole? I'm freezing. I need a smoke." "Hey, you down there, you don't happen to have a smoke on you, do you? Do you?" "No, are you crazy?" Ochre the smoker looked down to see a polar bear floating on an iceberg. "Sorry there, buddy. You aren't going to find any seeds around here. We have enough problems without seeds. Our polar ice caps are melting and the sea is rising. I hope you get to where you are going. So long, chap." And with that, the polar bear dove in the icy water. Ochre's teeth were chattering. He was freezing. He was going cold turkey in a hurry. His smoker's chair now had icicles hanging off its side, and Ochre's face, feet, and hands were turning blue. Not even a cig could save him. He rolled himself into a ball inside his smoker's chair and dozed off in the cold wind. Meanwhile, on the other side of the globe, the villagers were still celebrating Ochre's exit from their world. They hadn't seen sunshine like this for years, and they loved it. They planted gardens and trees and made plans for for the biggest project of all, tearing down Ochre's castle and building a park where they could look out over the land and sea. The sea was blue and the land was green for miles and miles. They would call it Scenery Point, and every day they would celebrate clean air and water from the edge of the ledge. Ochre could see none of this, of course. He didn't know where he was except somewhere near the North Pole. He had drifted over nothing he had ever seen before. He shivered and yelled, "Where the heck am I?" Suddenly he felt a huge thud on the back of his chair. Snap! What the? Hey, watch where you're driving, pal. Driving? Who is driving? Yelled Ochre. I'm drifting and nowhere fast. Who are you and where are you going? I'm a puffin. I'm a puffin what? The ogre replied. I'm a puffin, a seabird. What are you? I'm an ogre who needs a seed. Hey, you wouldn't have a smoke on you, would ya? I'm freezing cold and I need a smoke. Speaking of puffin, I would like to be puffin one right now. A smoke? Oh, that's too bad, said the puffin. You must be going cold turkey. I heard that's rough. I can't help you, mate. So, Mr. Ogre, where are you headed? Darn if I know. I've been drifting for days. Strapped in this chair, freezing cold, replied Ochre. Oh, you don't fancy the cold, do you? Well, don't worry. Just wait a while. Everything is warming up. It won't be long before we are all swimming, said the puffin. Swimming? Swimming where? The ogre asked. The ogre was getting angrier and angrier. He was lost without the smoke and no one seemed to care. What did the puffin mean? Everyone will be swimming soon. That thought frightened and angered the ogre more. The puffin took off, diving down into the sea, gone from sight. The ogre sat in his icy chair, shivering, weightless, and wondering what to do. The sky was cloudy. He just kept drifting and drifting. He was tired. He was cold and he could do nothing. He leaned back in his chair and before long he fell fast asleep. Lucky for the ogre, he could snore. Boy, he could snore. And he could snore loud too. The villagers would hear him in his castle snoring at night high above the valley. His snore was so loud sometimes it sounded like a freight train had roared into town. He was known to have shattered a few windows with his fierce snore too, and now his snore was propelling him through the cold air. One snore after another, his smoker's chair was sailing a snoutful at a time. The icicles on his chair began to melt. He snored and drifted for miles. Yes, it was getting warmer by the minute, just like the puffin said. Hey, you up there. How's the view? Can you hear me? Well, huh? The ogre woke up from his big snoring sleep. Who's that? I'm down here, replied the voice. The ogre looked over his shoulder and down into the sea below. Where are you headed? The voice returned. I don't know, and who you might be. I'm a wayward Monty. I'm a sea cow. I rounded up from Florida. I just follow the warm water. I don't know where I am at the moment, but it doesn't matter. Say, hey, Monty, you wouldn't have a smoke on you, would you? A what? A smoke? A cig, the ogre resorted. A cig? Oh, you mean a cigarette. Heck no, I don't have any cigarettes. I don't smoke, but a million people close by must smoke because I'm swimming in floating cigarette butts all day. It's disgusting. And there are dead fish everywhere too. I'm just trying to keep my head above warm water and away from red tide and runoff. It's a killer. Hey, I can help you with your smokes, but good luck there, bud. Hey, maybe you should try quitting. Ever thought of that? And with one splash of a tail, he was gone. The thought that Bud were in the water nearby meant there must be smoke close by for sure. But where? A stiff breeze had built up to push the big ogre onward. In the distance, he stared towards the horizon. He squinted, hoping to see something other than water. It was warmer for sure, just like the puffin had said. He was glad to be out of that cold freezing air from a day ago or so. As he squinted, the air changed again. There was a freshness he hadn't smelled before. It was odd, he thought. It actually felt good. He took a deep breath and held it in. Now this isn't bad, he thought. The ogre began feeling a little dizzy and a bit lightheaded. His craving for a smoke seemed to leave him. He felt different, refreshed, alive, and a little calmer perhaps. He sat in his smoker's chair and looked around puzzled, but oddly content for the moment. He wondered if he'd ever see his castle again. He wondered if he'd ever see the village below. He wondered and wondered. Well, the village was doing fine, mind you. With no ogre around, the villagers had demolished the castle in a couple of weeks. They took apart every brick and stone from the castle and placed them along the village shoreline. It was a good thing, too. The villagers were glad to have the ogre gone, glad to have the sun back during the day and the moon glow at night. But not everything was sunny and moonlit. Their shoreline was eroding. Water was getting higher than it ever did before. When the moon was full, the high tides were touching the seaside roads. If it weren't for the bricks and stones from the ogre's big decrepit castle, the road would be impassable, for sure. There worked around the clock and building a levee to keep them high and dry. With every stone and brick from the castle, they built a wall 10 feet high around the village. They felt much safer. Then they got every bolt they had and tied them down on top of the wall for the big day if it ever happened. Ochre the ogre sat in a smoker's chair, gliding along. On the horizon he peered. He rubbed his tired eyes and blinked, trying to sharpen his vision. Way out in the distance, something looked different. The colors weren't the same. They looked green. He squinted and blinked again. What was it? Something was sticking up. It wasn't flat like the sea below. Could it be land, he wondered? Whatever it was, it got greener and taller every minute. Yes, he had spotted land. Land ho! He shouted. He sat up on the edge of his perch and jumped in his seat with excitement. Land at last! In a few short minutes he had approached what looked like a shoreline with ocean waves crashing on the rocks. He could make out a cliff on the edge of the shore and what looked like a wall separating the land from the sea. On top of the wall were tiny boats, stacked side by side. Behind the wall were lots of houses and a few tall buildings. It all seemed strangely familiar, like he had seen it in a dream. Up in the sky, a weird-shaped cloud came out of nowhere, and for the people in the streets, it caught everyone's attention. All the villagers stopped what they were doing and looked up. First, they thought it was a blimp or a giant balloon, but something was dangling down from the cloud that looked like feet, giant feet, in fact. Maybe it was a UFO? They were all very frightened of whatever it was. The mayor and the village chief yelled to each other and called an emergency meeting. They decided to sound the village alarm warning people to go back in their houses to be safe from whatever it was. The littlest villager stayed back and looked up. He was trying to figure out what it was. He knew those feet. There was no mistaking them. They were the feet of the ogre. Oh no, he was back. Oh no! But the little villager wasn't scared. He got up in the nerve and yelled up to the sky. Hey, Mr. Ochre, you smoking ogre. I thought you were gone for good. The ogre didn't hear him from over the loud siren below. The sound was painful for the ogre. He plugged his ears and looked down as the sirens continued to blare. The houses and buildings were familiar, all right. These were the same as the village he lived above in his castle. He turned around in his chair and looked for the giant hillside where his castle should be. But the castle was gone. He recognized the road that led up to it, but there was nothing but a giant pile of dirt where the castle once stood. Where is my castle? Screamed the ogre. Where is my castle? I demand to know where my castle went! His voice was so thundering, it shook the air around him. It was so loud it could be heard over the silence below. Where is my castle? He repeated. The littlest villager could hear the towering voice above the sirens, but he couldn't make out what was being said. He ran to the emergency siren tower and pleaded with the chief to shut it off. It's the ogre, chief. He's back. Watson, I can't hear you, yelled the chief. Quickly, the little kite stretched as far as he could. He reached the emergency switch and turned it off. Where's my castle? Roared the voice. Where's my castle? Its voice got louder and louder. The chief looked at the little boy. It's the ogre, he shouted. I told you, said the boy. The ground was shaking from the ogre's angry voice. Now everyone in the village was looking out of their windows and up in the sky. They gasped at the frightening and familiar voice. The sky got dark. The chair Ochre was sitting in got larger, and suddenly it was shaped like a giant anvil. It turned dark purple and rose thousands of feet above the ground. Rumble, rumble, rumble. An explosion shook the village below. Where is my castle? Where are my smokes? The ogre yelled louder and louder. Then lightning struck the siren tower. Thunder shook everything in sight. The ogre yelled louder. Lightning was crashing everywhere. The giant anvil cloud hovered and covered the entire village. Even the ogre looked small. One more clap of thunder and then it happened. The heavens opened up. It started to rain little drops, then medium drops, then huge drops, then humongous size drops, until it was raining torrents and sheets of paper. Hail the size of baseballs was falling and smashing roofs and windows. The siren sounded again and everyone knew what to do. This was the big one. They knew would come someday. They grabbed every man, woman, and child and headed for the levee walls. They climbed to the top and boarded every boat there was. Women and children got in first. Then the men climbed on. The rain was coming down harder and harder. The villagers hunkered down as best as they could to protect themselves from the sheets of rain and wind. In a matter of minutes, the town was empty and all the boats were full of villagers. They all set sail and rowed away fast from the levee walls and out to sea. The ogre's voice pounded. The waves from the sea rose up and began crashing over the levees. The rain was incredible. The villagers bailed out the water in their boats as fast as they could stay afloat. Where is my castle? Where are my smokes? The ogre wouldn't stop yelling. The streets in the villages started filling up with water and were flooded in a matter of minutes. The water even started to rise up the road that led to where the ogre's old castle once stood. The ogre looked down. The village was disappearing. Water was nearly touching the bottom of the giant cloud the ogre was hanging onto. Suddenly it dawned on the giant ogre that the water was about to capsize his thunder cloud. He was falling slowly into the sea. I can't swim! Then he heard the puffin's voice. It won't be long before we are all swimming. Swimming? Swimming? Oh no, cried the ogre. Just then a bolt of lightning hit the ocean below and jolted the ogre out of his chair. Splash! Kerplunk! In the water he went big ugly feet first. He thrashed about for a second or two, gasping for air. He tried to tread water, but couldn't. He was like a humongous lead sinker. Just then, floating right by his nose, he saw the polar bear, the bear that had a worried look on his face, but he was doing fine because he could swim. A second later, the whale swam by and waved at the ogre with his giant dorsal fin. Then the puffin popped out of the water and yelled out, "Great day for a swim, I ogre." Finally, the manatee rolled by too, and all of them watched as the ogre disappeared underwater, sinking to the bottom. Suddenly the rain stopped. The giant gray and purple clouds lifted and the waves got smaller and smaller. It was over. The big one had finally ended. The storm of the millennium was gone and the ogre with it. The next day, as the sun was setting, it was the littlest villager who spotted it first. Adrift on the calm sea, he woke up his boatmates and pointed to the horizon. There in the distance it appeared as a silhouette. At first, it was a shoal. Rowing towards the sea, began to recede, and the shoal rose out of the water. It had an odd shape. Rounded at the top, it looked like someone's head, but not just any head. It was all sea rock, and the head was covered with seaweed that hung down like hair. It was the ogre's head sticking out of the water. It had turned into cold petrified stone. His eyes were shut and a huge broken off tree limb was sticking out of its mouth, hanging down like a cigarette. His teeth were as black as coal. The villagers rode and rounded the giant shoal, looking in disbelief. They rode to the back of it. There the whale, polar bear, puffin, and manatee were splashing around about and laughing out loud. "So what shall we call it?" asked the whale. They looked at each other and smiled. "I'm not sure. It's weird looking, a bit menacing too." "I think it's going to be here a long time," said the puffin. "Should we build something on it, a lighthouse perhaps?" said the polar bear. "Yes, yes, that's a splendid idea," said the manatee. The littlest villager sat on the bow of the boat and looked at the huge stone head rising out of the water. The giant tree limb sticking out of his mouth gave him an idea. He jumped out of the boat with excitement. "No, I've got it. Let's build a wishing well on his head," he said. "Yes, yes," they all shook their heads in agreement and patted him on the back. "What a splendid idea," they all shouted. They jumped out of their boats and got organized into groups. They all pitched in and found enough loose sea rocks around the shoal to build a round base for the well. In about an hour they had the wishing well finished, and it looked terrific. It was almost as perfect as the village wishing well they were so used to seeing every day. "It is time for a wish," shouted the mayor. Just at that moment the littlest villager looked down on the shoal shore and spotted something shiny. He reached down and there, stuck between two small shells, was an Indian head penny. "My lucky day," he thought. Instead of putting it in his pocket, he placed it in the palm of his little hand and walked over to the puffin. "Here, Mr. Puffin, I found a lucky penny. Take it." The puffin pinched the penny in its beak and flew up to the well and dropped it inside. "Let's make a wish," he said. And wish they did. They all wished for calm seas, clear skies, and a return for normal weather. The ogre was now a momentum to the wrath of nature's anger. They all held hands and watched in the light as the sun set. The sky cast a gorgeous glow of pink, oranges, and yellow over the water in front of them. The sun dipped just below the horizon and was gone. Then in an instant they all witnessed something very special. There it was, the green flash. Their wish has come true. The end.